Following the tabling of Budget 3.0, as it's become known, several issues now come into the spotlight, and these include addressing the 75 billion rand deficit, implications of increased borrowing and fuel costs, and the role of public-private partnerships, as well as driving economic growth. Well, to delve into these matters, lead economist at KPMG, Frank Blackmore, joins us now. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Hi.
How effective do you believe the proposed fuel cost increase of 15 to 16 cents per litre and the additional investments in SARS will be in addressing that 75 billion rand deficit over the medium-term period?
Well, I think the numbers are provided in the estimate from National Treasury and only partially covers that amount that you mentioned. But also remember there were other initiatives on the table as well. The reduction in the number of goods identified for zero rating in VAT, some borrowing increases, also some expenditure decreases. So the sum total of that should make provision for most of that amount over the next 3 years.
I see you touching there on the increased borrowing with the debt to GDP ratio rising. What are the long-term risks of increased borrowing, particularly in the context of reduced expenditure on frontline services like health and education?
Yeah, I think that's an important point. Remember, the number that you've mentioned there, the 77.4%, has got two variables in it. It's got the borrowing number, the debt number, but it also has GDP. And bringing back the assumption of economic growth from the 1.9 that we saw in the second budget to 1.4 would increase that ratio anyway, because you'd have a smaller denominator. But there is some additional borrowing there. However, I don't think this has been too surprising to markets. We haven't seen a negative reaction in that the peak debt is still going to be experienced in this financial year. We're still going to, it's going to still result in a primary surplus. In other words, the costs less the interest expenses is going to be less than revenue. So we should be able to decrease debt from this point over the three-term period. And I think that's why, even with a slight increase in debt, the market is taking it pretty well.
Now, the budget avoids expanding the zero-rated goods basket and limits non-interest expenditure growth to, I think, 0.8%. Now, how do these measures impact South African social wage and economic growth prospects?
Yeah, I think those are good points. So it's slow growth, therefore, for this non-interest portion of expenditure. Obviously, we would want to see that more if we want sort of better outcomes in terms of this sort of services rollout phase. But I don't think there's going to be a large impact there. I think there is going to be cutting in this budget as well. This budget, remember, although it's a cut from the second budget, it's still an increase from last year's budget. And we need to do something regarding the debt and the debt service costs in order to free up more money to go towards these frontline services.
Well, the public sector wage bill and debt deficit are persistent challenges. Now, what structural reforms could better address these issues to free up resources for growth initiatives?
Well, we saw how difficult it was for the Government of National Unity to agree on the VAT rise. I think other proposals made by the Minister himself was expenditure reviews, and they seem to be yielding relatively good outcomes in terms of freeing up greater revenue to use on these frontline services. And then there will probably be debates also around the size of government, the administrative size. If we can reduce that size of government in some respects, there'll obviously be more resources available to push into growth initiatives as well as sort of social wage.
And Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana added to new tax proposals for 2026. He alluded to that to cover an additional 20 billion rand gap. Now, what types of tax measures do you anticipate, and how may they balance revenue needs with economic growth?
Yeah, that's always the tight rope that they have to walk. I think a lot of the initiatives are just what we're seeing this year. In other words, no inflationary adjustment to tax brackets, etc. And if continued, may also need to be relevant for next year's budget. But I think there was a disclaimer under that saying, if revenues are greater than expected, we know a lot of investment is going into SARS. In the second budget, there was mention of a known amount of over 150,000 individuals that were still owed SARS tax but weren't paying that tax. If that can, for example, a portion of that can be collected, then it was clear from his statement last night there may not be additional increases in taxes. So that's what we're hoping for at this point.
Thanks very much. That's lead economist at KPMG, Frank Blackmore, joining us this afternoon.